Andrew Napolitano is senior judicial analyst at Fox News. He appears daily on The Big Story with John Gibson. He co-hosts Fox and Friends once a week, and he's a regular on The O'Reilly Factor. He is the youngest life-tenured Superior Court judge in the history of the state of New Jersey. He served as adjunct professor at Seton Hall Law School, where he taught constitutional law and jurisprudence. A graduate of Princeton University and a law school graduate of the University of Notre Dame, he is the author of Constitutional Chaos and the Constitution in Exile. Now, I got to tell you something about these two books. When I picked up these books to read, I figured they're probably just going to be sort of a conservative analysis of the law. And since I'm a lawyer, I had some background in terms of integrating libertarian economic principles and legal principles and so forth. Especially, there was a great book called Economic Liberties in the Constitution by Bernard Segan that played a big role in my intellectual development. So I figured when I picked up these books, they certainly weren't going to rank there as going to be your standard conservative type screed. I got to tell you, I was overwhelmed, absolutely overwhelmed. I mean, I consider myself a fairly hardcore purist libertarian. These books were opening up my eyes to principles, libertarian principles that I had never even thought of. I mean, Andrew, I hope that this compliment, the adjective that I'm going to use in this compliment, does not get you fired at Fox News. And I certainly hope it doesn't get me sued for defamation. But these are two of the finest libertarian books I have ever read. So they are fantastic. I highly recommend them. It is with great honor and pleasure that I introduce to you Andrew Napolitano. The title of his talk is Civil Liberties in Wartime.
There are 535 people on Capitol Hill whose job it is to write the laws that govern all of us, and he is one of them. There are 535 people on Capitol Hill whose job it is to preserve the Constitution, and he is one of them. There are 535 people whose job it is to preserve our liberties, and he is one of them. But in his heart and in his head, in his character and in his intellect, in what he has done and in what he will become, the Thomas Jefferson of our day, Ron Paul, is one of us. I think I had been on the bench for about 2 weeks, and they assign you small claims. You walk out on the bench, and there's about this many people in your courtroom, and they each want to have their case heard before lunchtime. And a typical case is the dry cleaner ruined my dress, but he also tried to pick up my cousin. So a lawyer comes up to me and says, Judge, we're going to need a translator for this case. My client doesn't speak any English. I said, what language does your client speak? He said, Italian. I called the courthouse administrator looking for the Italian translator. She was busy in another courtroom. So I said to the 300 people in my courtroom, is there anybody here that speaks Italian? Little guy in the back raises his hand. He comes up. We swear in the translator. We swear in the witness. And here is exactly, literally what happens. Lawyer to translator, tell the court your name. Translator to witness, what is your name? I said, all right, let me see where this is going to go. Lawyer to translator, give the court your address. Translator to witness, where is your house? I looked at this guy and said, I thought you told me you could speak Italian. He said, I can, Your Honor, but my English is not so good. In New Jersey, when you're trying a criminal case and a civil case, a jury case, the judge picks the jury. So you walk out again in your courtroom. There's 200 people there. You have to pick 12 that have no bias, prejudice, interest in the outcome, and so you interrogate them. So I said, is there anybody in this room? This was a drug distribution case. We had to try those. Is there anybody in this room that doesn't want to be on this jury? A little lady raises her hand and said, I can't be on the jury because of my occupation. Well, all right, what does she do? I fall for this. She said, I said, Madam, what do you do? She said, I'm a soothsayer. Wow, come on, who calls themselves a soothsayer today? So again, I fall for it, and I said, lady, how does that keep you from being on this case? She said, Judge, I already know how it ends up. I should have said, lady, tell us and save us the next 3 weeks in the courtroom. Now, I have to take a little blame for an unhappy event. It was the recount in November and December of 2000. And at Fox, we were working 17, 18-hour days. I had to become an expert, as you may recall, in Florida election law. And I was on the air towards the end of the recount. It was early December. I was on the air with Britt Hume. It was 10 minutes to 7. I was in New York. Britt was in Washington. Through the magic of television, it looked like we're in the same room together. And all of a sudden, one of those swoosh alerts that Fox does about 25 times every 30 minutes comes on. He says, Judge, we just got word that the Florida Supreme Court has ordered that the recount resume not only in the 4 counties where Gore and Bush are in dispute, but in all the counties in the state of Florida. And we further learned that the lawyers for Governor Bush are going to appeal this decision of the Florida Supreme Court to the United States Court of Appeals for the 11th Circuit in Atlanta. What do you think about that? And I said, well, Britt, it's pretty basic civil procedure. The United States Court of Appeals does not have jurisdiction to hear an appeal from the highest court of a state. He said, well, what should the Bush lawyers do? I said, well, they should go to Georgetown, where Justice Anthony Kennedy lives, and go to his house and knock on the door, because he is the circuit justice for the 11th Circuit, wherein Florida resides. He can stay the decision of the Florida Supreme Court for 24 hours pending a vote of the other justices of the Supreme Court. At that point, I went up to my office to take a nap because we had been going for so long. About 5 minutes after 7, this is 15 minutes later, my very garrulous, very excitable Fox News colleague Shepard Smith was hosting, and another one of those swooshes comes through, Fox News alert, and he said, we've just learned that the lawyers for Governor Bush have been cited in their cars in Georgetown looking for the house of Justice Anthony Kennedy. And then, as only Shep can do, he looks in the camera and says, do you know what that means? That means that George Bush is watching Fox. And he's getting his legal advice from Judge Napolitano. I'm sorry. The rest, as they say, is history. It's funny how you get a reputation. As Yogi Berra said, half the lies they say about us are untrue, and the other 3/4 are gross exaggerations.